So let me,
Sorry, all right.
okay, so let me ask you, what do we do as chiropractors? What is it the thing we do?
Ooh.
Find subluxation.
Check.
Find it.
Locate and correct vertebral
Okay.
subluxations.
Do we correct?
I mean,
Well, by
Entice the
innate.
intelligence to make the correction.
Entice, I like the entice intelligence. We assist, right? So we detect, is there one? We locate, where is it? We analyze it, what is it? What's the listing? And then we use our educated intelligence to assist the client's innate intelligence in making the correction. All we can do is offer up a universal destructive force, right? And people say, well, you know, you're 350, 380, 400 pounds, whatever it is, whenever you talk to me. How do you do this? And I'm like, my goal is to give 101% of the force needed for the body to adapt and correct itself. And why that extra 1%? It's like in case one of us flinches. Because I don't know if you know this or not, it hurts a lot more to get a 98% thrust and nothing happened than it does to get 102% thrust and something happened. Am I right? So I want to go just a little bit, but I don't do 150%. I don't want to do 200% of what your body needs, because then we're both bad, right? So that's my goal, is to do that. So we detect, we locate, we analyze, and we assist in the correction of vertebral subluxation. So what is this thing called? Well, this vertebral subluxation is, how do we know what it is? What is it? You guys are familiar with MOPI, right? Who's been taught that's antiquated? You guys think this is a current theory? Well, you can be honest with me, because they're both true. It's the original. But Dr. Kent, in his research, and he published a paper in '99, and he just republished it last year, shows that all theories of subluxation can still be categorized in these four components. So it depends on how intellectual you want to look, or if you just want to get down to the nuts and bolts and talk about subluxation. Fair enough? So with the simplicity of this, instead of going through the 27 different components of a neurodystrophic blah, 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 I'm just going to talk about MOPI. Fair enough? Is that good? Can we handle that? Okay, a little bit of background for me. I'm a third-degree black belt in martial arts, and I'm a certified instructor. And if I don't get feedback, I tend to start over. Okay? That was a good chance to try. So, it's a really good chance. Oh, my goodness, here we go. So all of these fit these four categories, and here it is here. Basic science, clinical models, Lance, even previous syllabus, all concepts of verbal subluxation come back to these four. So 96, that's what that was. So you guys know the anatomy and physiology that we're dealing with here, correct? Specifically for paraspinal thermography. The dorsal horn, the spinal cord, dorsal horn, nerve root, the chain ganglia, capillary beds. You know all that? You guys all know that? You know it's a really short path, right? There's very little extra stuff that can get into that path, and so it's a really good thing to check to see if there's an imbalance in the nervous system. We all on the same page? You just ate. I want to make sure that he was right, because, you know, I'm the authority. He just gets to be here. I'm just teasing. Grant, listen to what Grant says. He's really good at this. And you know that the capillary beds, they're just carrying heat. They're not trying to feed anything. They're carrying heat. The larger caliber, the more heat's carried and dissipated, the lower the caliber, or the more constriction, the less blood flow. The colder that side is. You guys remember? Okay, good. Making sure. Objectifying subluxation. I want to draw your attention to this. First, this is 1994, Dynamic Chiropractic. This is talking about objectifying subluxation. This is not about guessing. This is not about wondering. This is not about a subjective me versus you kind of thing. And down here at the bottom is this work was published under the auspices of, what does that say?
Canadian Emerald.
So in the 1960s, CMCC actually did the landmark publication on the science behind thermography. CMCC. Objectifying subluxation. 50 years ago. They made this publication. I have the original. We've been given rights to share it with it, but so I'm going to have some excerpts here. What's really cool is the nerve pathways, even in the 60s, have been well documented in the field of neuroanatomy, not just chiropractic, but in neuroanatomy. It's well documented, it's everywhere, it has nothing to do with chiropractic when they wrote it, but it's been well documented. So we're not guessing here. We're not coming up with some weird theory to make it work. The article goes on to say that low resolution electronic chiropractic thermography, objective monitoring of a patient in conjunction with x-rays and all these other things. Chiropractic enables, or thermography enables the doctor to evaluate the neurophysiology, which is critical to health. This kind of is out of place, so just skip over this. It talks about immunology. It's a good thing to read, but for what we're talking about today, just ignore this one right here. And so now we have it, scientific evidence which confirms that chiropractic has said since 1895. Oops, sorry. Since 1895. 1960s, Canadian Memorial Chiropractic wrote this thing proving what we've said since 1895, that an interruption in the flow of mental impulses causes physiological change. And here's a way to document it that has very little other inputs to the system. We cool so far? This is all rehashing what you learned over the last 2 days, right? Did you steal my slides and just redo it?
No.
Okay. Again, this is 1960s. This is called segmental neuropathy. It's from CMCC. Talks about conversational tone. This is just the normal stuff going between the different components. Over here to the capillary beds, just showing you all the different connections. Also talks about the confluence of systems, how that also affects other things, muscle balance, visceral function through the vagus nerve, pain, against skin temperature, and all of these things. That picture wasn't in the original publication. I put that for my slides. And here we go with an article in 1988, thank you. So, in conclusion, it's a good guess that thermography might help you, guess at where things are at. So we're not dealing with something that's new and unproven. We're not dealing with something that's a guess. This has been around for a very, very long time. In fact, it's the very first technology adopted by chiropractic. Shortly after, X-ray was adopted by chiropractic. But in 1920, when Doss Evans was working with B.J. Palmer in the clinics, I'll go into that just a minute. So here again, 1988, Journal of Neurosurgery for chiropractors. This doesn't have anything to do with chiropractic, right? Right? What does it say at the bottom? The degree of asymmetry is a guess indicator of dysfunction. It's a quantifiable, it's measurable, and it means something. And this is in the Journal of Neurosurgery. So, did I make my point? Okay, I think he did that too. So, how do we use our assessment tools? This is something I've never seen anywhere else except for my presentations. And so if I start seeing it other places, I know where people got it from. It's called a rubric, right? We have one set of ideas and another set of ideas or standards. Let's see how they mesh together, okay? So the four components of vertebral subluxation are malposition, malfunction, occlusion, pressure, interference, and the transmission of mental impulse, right? So what do each one of these assessment technologies show us? So what would you guess that X-ray, MRI, or any other static image, what does it show us? M&O, that's all it can show us, right? It can't show us pressure, and it can't show us the dynamics of an interference. What about motion palpation? Can it show us malposition or malfunction? Malfunction. What about occlusion? Can it show us there's occlusion? Can it show us pressure? Not directly. Can it show us interference? No. What about static palpation? It can show us basically if something's not in the right place with its neighbor, right? What about your technique checks? That can actually show interference, because that's what it's checking, right? Interference in the balance. And thermography is over here. I wanted to add another column, and I will for future, because HRV is this big thing right now. What does HRV show us? of the vagus nerve, but how much is in the pathway between nerve root and what we're measuring? You have a lot of things contributing to that imbalance that may have nothing to do with the vertebral column. Specifically the SA node, which is huge in the HRV thing. And so I don't know that it shows us anything here. It shows us overall health. But HRV is a big thing. And you can do this with any technology if you're realistic with what it can show you and see how it fits. So if we just use MRI or any kind of static imaging, does that show us where our subluxation is? It's going to get easier after they answer the first one. No, it can't, right? It doesn't show us interference. And if we just deal with M&O, what does it make us?
Manipulate.
Manipulators or neurosurgeons or orthopedic surgeons, right? Right? If we're just going to correct motion, we're just going to correct malposition, we're just going to carve out the occlusion to make it bigger, right? That's the realm of not us. Now, what if we just did motion palpation and that's all we used? Sorry?
Probably PT.
Yeah. Do you see where I'm headed with this? Now, is motion palpation a good tool to have in your toolbox? Yeah, it's a great tool to have in your toolbox. In fact, I would think most motion palpation have a lot to do with technique checks. If you look at things, there's motion palpation in almost every technique check I know. So what you need is a full toolbox. You might have to have multiple tools. So I don't think Graham would tell you this, that this is the only way to check for subluxation. In fact, it probably is x-rays and thermography, right? And that CBCT thing that's coming out now with a bunch of new technologies. But if it doesn't show you MO and I, it's just guessing, and you may not be doing chiropractic. P is difficult because that's the pressure at the occlusion. And you got to put a needle in there, and the problem with putting a needle into a pressure situation, you by default change the pressure. So I haven't figured out how to do that yet, and I don't think anybody else has actually done it. So this is kind of one of those theoretical things still there. But if you have MO and you have I at that level, you can assume P. Fair enough? Okay, so set your toolbox with tools that you use in your system, and that's what you use for this reason. What's the worst thing a chiropractor can do?
Just an unsubluxated person.
Right, because you're not adjusting them, you're manipulating them, right?
Correct.
You're basically solving battery, saying I'm working on something that's not there. And that becomes fraud if you bill for it. Make sense? So use your tools to see if or if not I should or should not adjust, and then go with what your findings tell you. Make sense? Cool. And of course you heard all that already too, didn't you? All right, so DDP, that's the DD Palmer talked about hot boxes being checked with the back of the hands, nerve tracing, irritated nerve roots, you can see where it's hot. BJ Palmer did nerve tracing along hot patches. Doss Evans said, hey, we have technology that can measure this. Let's put some thermocouples on the skin and see the imbalance side to side. And so he came up with a neurocalometer. I spelled it wrong, I'm sorry. Nerve temperature measurement. And then Clay Thompson wrote a letter. Have you seen that letter that Clay Thompson wrote? Did you know he was a big proponent of thermography? Clay Thompson, drop table guy. Huge. He actually wrote the FDA to say, why aren't you approving this? I'll show you that letter in just a second. Oh, look, DD Palmer, Doss Evans, NCM, BJ Palmer. Hey, I just told you all this stuff. The dark, you want to know the dark history of thermography? Do you know about that the profession was deeply damaged in 1926 by seeing because of the NCM? You know what happened?
BJ wanted like $500 a month for the lease of the NCM, something like that.
Right, that was the aftermath. That was the nail in the coffin. But what happened? Do you remember what he said on stage? Anybody remember that?
Everybody has to.
Or you're not practicing chiropractic. And if somebody would said that to me today, it's like, hey, we have this brand new technology you've never seen before. If you're not using it, you're not doing chiropractic. I would say, what have I been doing for the last 30 years? It's been chiropractic, we just don't have this tool. But he got up there and said, if you don't use this, you're not practicing chiropractic. And that kind of started some divides in the profession. And then he did the thing nobody but Palmer owns the neurocalometer. So if you actually see one in the field, and somebody says to you it's mine, they're lying because it's not theirs. He never sold them, never let them out of his possession. Well, other than, anyway, I'll just leave it there. This is actually the letter from Clay Thompson to the FDA saying, hey guys, listen, chiropractor, the medical doctor takes temperature to see how the state of the human is. The chiropractor does the same thing, we just use a different device. We don't stick it in the oral cavity or the anal cavity. So I don't know what your problem is. We're actually less invasive than the medical doctor, and it's a higher degree of certainty. So it's obvious in the medical field that taking the temperature has little to do with the type of disease. Likewise, it makes little difference chiropractically as what the patient has symptomatically. A responsive temperature change guides the chiropractor. This is Clay Thompson, guys. Okay? And Roger actually worked with Clay in developing the original Titron. Clay was one of the guys that Roger got to meet early on, which makes me extremely jealous. All right, patents. On the far left is the original Doss Evans patent of 1923. And what it was two thermocouples that actually touched the skin, and you got a reading of the difference between the two. Okay? Make sense? This was actually from this adapted, anyway, this is a later version. This is, I can't read this close, 1945. See how big the box is? So it's actually taking reading along these, giving you a difference between the two. But again, it's giving you the difference between the two. And it's touching the skin. This is actually, I had this in my hand at Lyceum. This is actually patent held by CMCC. Has two heads, it gives you the readings on both heads. And it has a wheel and all kinds of stuff. It looks like a original phaser from Star Trek, kind of really cool without the handle down below, the kind of cool. Head rollers and all kinds of stuff, but again, the sensor touched the skin. So how does thermography work? Did you get into the physics of thermography?
I'll let that for you.
Thank you. So basically, thermography is a form of electronic, heat is a form of electromagnetic radiation. You guys knew that, right? From undergrad? And you know that electromagnetic radiation spreads out from its point. And any reader reads from all around it into itself. So it's not particularly interested in what direction it's coming from, it's just how much is coming in. Make sense? So on a thermocouple, you have a hot joint and a cold joint. You have a hot junction and a cold junction, and the difference in heat is how much those change. So if you have a bimetal thermocouple, it's how much they bend. If you have a thermocouple that's made out of crystals, it's how much they separate or how much electrostatic charge they produce. But you always have a cold and a hot. And so when electromagnetic radiation in the form of heat hit that, they change, you can measure that change. And that's what gives us the reading. Well, that change is also based on the ambient temperature of the device. And that's important to know because we'll talk about the device in a second. But the problem is, I'll tell you the story I'll tell you the story about how it was found out. The problem is every detector up to the point of the Titron was just open. And so they had to get really close to the skin and contact the skin with the thermocouples. The problem with that is the transfer of oils, transfer of skin stuff. I'm not even worried about infection at this point, just friction, all that stuff affects that thermocouple. And it had to be on a post that had no thermal sink to it. There was no thermal stability, so it was just all over the place. The resolution of that was extremely small. And if you happen to bring it off the skin when you were reading it, now your resolution changed to an area that was 3 or 4 square centimeters. Make sense? So since electromagnetic radiation is what we're measuring, what other technology do we use that uses EM rays, X-rays?
Right.
X-rays, right? I said it, I didn't mean to. And so if you put a tube that happens to be thermally stable in front of a lens, in front of the thermocouple. Now you have this range is 360-degree bulb. Now it's down to a tube that you can look down and see only that part. If it's up against, or even if it's away, it's going to keep that the radiation coming in at a very, very specific point. And that's what Roger did. Okay. So anybody want to guess? Anybody know how he came up with that? He had a friend. He was working on Roger's an amazing guy. He was working at Welsh Allen. He's working on bifurcated laser through fiber optics. Found out if you could split a fiber optic tube just right and shorten it up a little bit and join them back together, it forms an oscillation. You can actually measure interference in the light beam up to millionths of a second. Cool stuff, right? Has nothing to do with this yet. He also found that he could measure temperature over a distance if we had this collimated tube. And he actually came up with, a friend of his was a roofer, and they had those hot seaming, the continuous roof, but they laid it in sheets and he had to heat seal them together. If they got too hot, they melted. If they weren't hot enough, they didn't seal. And there's like a 5-degree difference between the two. And so he was having trouble, so Roger came up with a gun to measure that. Well, the first gun didn't have a tube, and it had to be sitting right over it, and it melted within like 2 minutes. And so he put a tube on it and put it back over the machine through a stainless steel mirror and pointed it down right on the spot where it was heated. And if it was hot enough, it let the machine go forward, and so it controlled the speed of the machine over the roof. And he was telling me the first time they tested was on this huge dome roof. It was the middle of summer, and this thing was just going along, and at the top of the roof, it'd slow down, almost stop. And then over the top, it'd speed up. You turn around, did the same thing, same spot. They're like, oh man, it's not gonna work. It's broken, blah, blah, blah. But they went inside and found out that the main AC ducts were right down the center of the roof. And so that spot was colder, so it had to take longer to heat it up, and so his device worked. That was back before he met Clay Thompson. So when he was presented with this idea of taking this contacted IR, or infrared sensor, heat sensor, and making it better, he's like, I already have the solution for that. I did it for the roofing industry. So he pulled it back and put a tube on it. Then he made two. Then he did some other things we're going to talk about in a little bit, why you need certain bits of data, okay? Cool with that? The other thing is, if your device doesn't have a very solid, thermally stable head, these readings can't be relied upon. If I heat up one side of this and then immediately take a reading, the heat hasn't had the ability to transfer across everywhere, and so it's going to be off. So that's why you don't store it next to like this, next to an exhaust of a computer, or you don't have one side of it heated through the window. This way you take care to make sure this is thermally stable so that when you do your scans they're as accurate as possible, okay? And if there's other devices that say they do the same thing, that don't have a heavy metal or thermally stable head, it's probably not true. The other thing is if these barrels move, which is a really cool sales technique, physics, they can't be connected to that thermally stable sink. And so it's not going to give you the same reliability as something that has stability. Make sense? Okay. That's just physics. All right, enough of that. Any questions so far? All right, so hot versus cold, which is it?
Cold is chronic and hot is acute.
Who told you that?
School, I guess.
Any other guesses? I didn't say you were wrong.
Well,
Four choices: hot, cold, both, neither.
Both.
Okay. BJP, funny thing is these physiologists, Stafford Palmer came involved with BJ and said, listen, we think we need to change what we're teaching because we found that if there's irritation of one of these nerves, it actually causes constriction rather than dilation. And so the site of constriction is going to be the site of irritation. And so that means it's cold. And BJ Palmer looked at a couple of his, clinic guys, and he's like, what do you think? They're like, well, they're actually right. And BJ stood up. And this is the story he's telling to his foot. He says, as long as I'm alive, it's going to be the heat. And he walked out of the room. Okay? So, a little bit of history there. So interference in that causes a constriction because those muscles have to be active to cause dilation. But in reality, it's imbalance, so it is both. It's the imbalance. So what's the difference between the two? We talked about collimation, we talked about scatter, we talked about focus, and then exposure time. You guys know all about that from x-rays, right? If I take a scan and I go too fast, your data is not going to be very reliable. If I go too slow, it's not going to be very reliable either. All right, so thermography, its validity and research. There's Dr. D'Onofrio from Sherman College of Chiropractic and Dr. Hart both did a paper. And then their paper showed to extremely high level of reliability that there's inter-operator reliability and intra-operator reliability. So if we had 10 people here, I could do 10 scans on one person. If I did them exactly the same, I get 10 exact scans. If I did scans on each person, and I go back and do scans on each person, they're all going to be extremely reliably the same. If I did one scan, and you did one scan, and you do one scan on the same person, you wouldn't be able to tell who did the scan. So it's inter and intra-operator reliability. The importance of that in practice is, whether I scan it, or my CA scans it, or my other associate scans it, or mom scans, if they know how to stop it and start at the right spot, the scans are going to be identical within a certain degree of reliability. Does that make sense? So it makes it a really good, useful tool in a busy office. And from day to day, week to week, seeing clients of using it, you know that when I pick this up, if I start it right and end it right, it's going to be extremely reliable, like 98% of the time. Which 0.98 is extremely high when it comes to any kind of testing for reliability. And it's gotten to be a point where our thermography units are used in other research to prove theirs. Ours is so reliable that they use our results to prove other scientific research. I think that's pretty good. Okay, here is actually anybody familiar with Six Sigma measurements? This is a way of making sure your gauges are reliable. It's called a gauge repeatability and reproducibility study. So this is actually performed on the instruments, and it actually was twice as reliable as the standard average for all devices that these guys have measured. So you look at all the measurements they've taken of all instruments in their industry, and ours is twice as reliable as the standard of what they came up with. So another industry took a look at it. Again, they're actually looking at the use of different computer pattern analysis methods. They didn't question the thermography readings, they were just researching on how we're going to take this reliable data and play with it. Well, the Journal of Canadian Chiropractic Association, how about that? In their exam of reliability, interpretation of paraspinal thermography pattern analysis, again, they're looking at pattern analysis, they're not questioning or researching the data coming out of this, they're just using it for other starts. So, this is what I really want to spend time with you. Did Grant talk to you about the maths? This is on purpose of thermography. There are other units out there that will give you thermographic data. They limit what they give to you to second, third, and fourth derivatives of the raw data. Titron gives you the raw data because you're the doctor. You need to see the raw data to make the decision. I'm going to go through a little bit of an exercise to show you why. There's colors and not a few words, right? Very few words. Okay, so lots of colors and very few words. So hopefully that'll keep you awake. You ready? So we're talking about direct temperatures. That's the raw data. So when you look at a thermography scan, you see left, right, and middle, correct? Left and right is the raw data. That's the actual temperature you get from the device. Delta T is that middle one, okay? That's kind of like grade school math. It's what's the difference between these two? Grade school math, right? And then you have a hybrid delta t, which we're going to spend a lot of time on today because it's extremely useful. Pattern analysis 1 and 2, that's where you get, undergrad and doctorate level, postgrad, kind of PhD level. Or you can stick with bar graph, which is kindergarten Crayola stuff. Okay, and that's what it is, and I'll show you why. I do make fun of it, but if somebody gives a doctor, that's the only data they give you, they're not treating it with much respect. Sorry. Okay, I don't think any of my competitors give you just that, but if that's all you rely on, you're not using the technology appropriately, unless it's a screening situation where you're just trying to get the attention of the client. Okay, we clear on that? All right, so let's walk through this. So I have taken a spreadsheet and created this graph. So on the left, you have the left readings, and on the right, you have the right readings. This is your raw data. Cool with that so far? Here is the delta T. This is what is the difference between the two? Which side is hotter, and by how much? So let me just back up one. So if you just had this data, where would you be looking with your other assessment tools? Well, I would say here, right? There's a spike here, there's a spike there. Oh, there's a spike here, there's two spikes here going the same way. I'm gonna look at that one, right? Little bump here, oh, that one goes the other way, little bump there, that might be something to look at. These really not worried about, they're just a little bit off. Right? Now, if I go to the delta T, where am I looking? Well, here and here, I've already identified those points, but wow, look at that. That's spiked way to the right for this one. Okay. What happened to this one? Well, because this is the exact same temperature as that one.
Big heat went
So the difference is 0 for this whole section. See why we get the raw data? And look at this guy. He's he's like off the chart. But this is just a little blip. So you see how misleading delta T can be? Do you see that? It's important to see, because once we understand patterns, we can start using this as pattern, but you always need to look at the raw data no matter what. Is that clear? Are you sure? Because we're going to get a little bit more into it. So that's grade school and high school level math so far, correct? All right, so if we just take the left and the right, and we take the average and plot how far off average it is, we get a little bit more of an exaggerated graph here. Would you agree? Did you see that? So this is the first step in the hybrid delta T. We're taking an average, we're taking the difference from average, and now we're going to bring out our crayons, or our markers, and we're going to color in. Anything to the right is hotter, so we're going to color in that red, and we're coloring anything to the left blue. Make sense? I'm doing this for a reason. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put all that on the left side, because this is the left side's hybrid delta T. Okay? And then we're going to erase the right side. You see what we did there? Who wants to see that again? It's okay, you can raise your hand. We'll do it anyway. Oh. So here we are. Just look at the left too. So the far left is the raw data. Average it out and plotted the difference from that average. Here that is. Anything that was warmer than average, I colored red. Anything less than average, I colored blue. And then I just put everything on the left because that's going to be for the left. And I got rid of the right side. Got that? So this is just for the left. Then I did the same thing for the right. Okay? And when you put those back together, you have something called a hybrid delta T. Now what that does, if you remember, our delta T showed nothing going on here. But our hybrid delta T is still going to show us areas of cold and heat. Does it make sense? But it's also showing that, you know what, it's balanced. They're both cold a lot, but it's right here. Oh, you know what? I left their necklace on because it's a really fine chain silver necklace from Israel, and it's really hard to take on and off, and they told me that it would be really bad if I took it off because they'd never come back again. Oh, that's what that is. I can ignore that. Make sense? So this points, something's going on there. Oh, I know what it is. A little bit of heat, but guess what? It's balanced. Heat and cold, big imbalance here. Something to look into. Would you agree? So the hybrid delta T gives us that cold hot thing in a way to look at, is it balanced? How much off balance is it? And here, this is all heat and we have this spike of cold here. That might be something to really look at. And over here, the right side is colder than average and the left has that spike of hot. Might be something to look at. Fair enough? Is that pretty straightforward? All right. This is not that graph. This is something totally different. Last time I did all these questions about, I'm like, no, this is not anything to do with the previous data. This is an actual hybrid delta T from an actual client. Okay? And you can see the line here is the delta T. So that's the difference between right and left. And the patches of red are patches of heat. And the computer can actually say, if it's off this much, make it this color. If it's off this much, make it a different blue. You can change the colors, whatever. Personally, I just use blue and red. It makes it a lot easier for me because I'm a little bit colorblind. So you see there's some imbalance here that doesn't necessarily match on which side the delta T is on. Do you see that? So huge cold over here when it shows, well, heat over on this side. And then here it's kind of balanced, but then it goes shift over here when this isn't so far off center. Okay? So when you use these two together, you can kind of see where you might want to pay attention. It's going to tell you exactly. It's not going to tell you definitively if there's a problem there. It's just going to give you evidence that there might be something to look at there. Are we okay with that? All right. So here is 3 scans. You see 2 full spine scans and a cervical scan. The dark red is actually what's considered pattern for the setting here. Do you see anything that looks out of ordinary? If red is the determined pattern for this patient, are they in pattern or out of pattern?
Matt, you invested in that patient?
Let me back up. You guys know the difference between pattern and not in pattern?
Could you look at that?
I will. Thank you for asking that. So, what's the job of innate intelligence? One word, adaptation. If you're adapting, you're changing. If you're not changing, that means you're not adapting, which means there's a problem with innate's ability to communicate. Make sense? So, if we're stuck, this is pattern from 3 months ago, and this is today. If we're stuck, are we in pattern? Is that good or bad? Bad. Okay. Does that help? That's very simple?
Yeah.
Good. If you understand that, you can do advanced pattern work.
Okay.
Okay? Am I off? Okay, so we're good, right? So, are they in pattern or are they not? Right. Boom. There you go. Here's a problem. Top one. Hard to see. So this is 2 graphs taken one day apart. Are they in pattern or not?
Yeah, not bad.
Now, what about down here? Look at just the delta T. Look at the center. Would you consider that in pattern? No, but look at, was this in pattern? It's almost identical. Is this in pattern? Almost identical. And that's what you get to do as a doctor. Am I going to look at the raw data? Am I going to look at the derivative data? Or am I going to make my decision when I say, hey, I need to do another level of investigation? That's what you get to do as doctors. Make sense? That's why you don't always rely and only rely on derivative data, because it doesn't show you the real picture.
And so derivative data would be more like yeah, what's that called, what kind of analysis? I can't think right now. This is pattern analysis, break analysis. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Okay.
Break analysis is where the needle spikes to one side.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you look at just the middle, would you consider that pattern or not?
Yes.
Look at the sides, is that pattern or not? See why you can't always rely on the delta, and that's why we always use Titronics, always gives you all three. Because I'm the only doctor on staff at Titronics. And I'm not even gonna make that decision for you. Okay? We're gonna give you the data so you, as the doctor, can decide for that client on that visit at that time. Is this sufficient evidence to go forward with your assessment, or is this enough to stop down saying, see you next week? Make sense? All right, bar graphs. Oh, kindergarten. Oh, get out of crayon. What can you tell from any of this? Typically, this is oldest, newest.
Yeah, I used to
Like they were on day one.
Sorry?
At the end of their care, they're to look just like they did on day one.
Okay. Can you say that with absolute certainty?
According to that graphic.
Right. So do you know the math behind the graphic here? So for Titronics, we take 16 pictures every inch. And for this is about, 6 inches? So about 120 pictures. And we have 7 graphical representations, which means we're averaging a bunch of information to get this graph. So is this good for analysis and deciding whether to adjust or not? Is this good for patient education? Absolutely it is. This is easy to understand, especially when you have a cartoon behind it showing the neck.
Do not use this when you're checking patients day to day.
No.
This is not pattern. This is not pattern analysis.
Okay? So does this look familiar? So this is back to my generated data here, okay? And so we see the hybrid delta T in the middle. I'm going to show you now is if we take this and we average it out, this would be the bar graph for that. Do you see a problem?
Yes.
Nothing correlates, does it? It's a big problem. I am never one to talk about negative about other professions or other competitors or collaborators or anything like that. A bar graph does not help you do your job. If that's the only data you're given, it's not a tool, it's a toy. Okay? And you know what the contraction for bar graph is? Barf! There you go. But again, it's a great screening tool, okay? Now, here's some things. Here's some pitfalls for thermography. It is a highly accurate tool. It's highly reliable. No matter who on your staff, as long as they're trained well to do it, the data is highly reliable. It is not going to tell you the listing. It's not going to tell you the level. And it's probably not going to tell you which side. It's only going to tell you that there's good, high probability that you might need to do your other checks to verify the presence of vertical subluxation. But more importantly, it'll tell you there's nothing wrong here. There's a high probability the person's not in pattern. There's a high probability they're in adaptation, which means see you next week. Okay? That takes a few visits to build up that everything's falling into place. I recognize pattern, which is more than just thermography. Has Grant told you that? Your pattern is just not the graph. Your pattern is everything that the client presents with. All your assessment, that forms a pattern. If you see that same thing every time, they're in pattern, they need to be adjusted probably. Okay? If you establish pattern and they show up and there's nothing the same, guess what you do? Ring the bell, you're cleared. Bye, see you next week. Right? Right, very good. So, over time, you can associate the scan pattern with all the other things. And so you can limit it down to, I'm going to scan first, it's quick and easy, gives me instantaneous, reliable data, not in pattern, you know what? I feel really good with this, we'll see you next week. Or, you know what? I kind of have a feeling we need to check something else. Oh, you know what? You're not in pattern, we'll see you next week. I know you feel crummy, that's just your body dealing with whatever's going around. We'll see you next week. Make sense? Any questions about that?
So Dwayne, what you're saying is if I take a scan and the heat swings out on the right, that doesn't mean that they have an ASR. It doesn't mean they have an
No.
right.
Well, what's your pattern?
Right. That's the point I'm trying to make. Don't get your mind into that type of mode where you see heat swing on the right, so now you look for right-sided listings. If you have an X-ray analysis, don't do that.
No. No. And even Gonstead uses the brakes. That's not all they use, trust me. Working with the Diplomat in Gonstead, they use that to say, okay, I need to focus on this area. Then they do their other checks to verify or debunk that finding, and then they'll adjust after they verify. Okay? Does it make sense? Only the lazy people just rely on just that. Okay? The really acute ones may look like they're just relying on it, but they've already got other things in place to let them know. Is there enough evidence to go ahead with adjustment? Or, you know what, that's the worst thing I could do is put an adjusting thrust into non-subluxation.
Yeah, well, and if you're only using that, you're not using all the components of MOPI.
Yep. There you go. All right, so we did the pitfalls. We did that. All right, so now comes the tool part. I represent one manufacturer of devices. I know of two other manufacturers of devices. One actually sells our products as theirs. Okay, and that's Myovision. And they use our scanners. They just put their component in there to make it wireless with their system. The other competitor is CLA with their thermal scan. Those are the only ones that I know of in the market. There used to be a competitor in Japan, and they actually copied our design. They didn't copy our electronics, and so it failed miserably. This was developed over the course of decades with high-end, intense users and part of research and development. We have, did you know there's a doctorate, or there's a diploma in chiropractic thermography program? There is, and one of the first people and one of the biggest names in that is on our consulting staff, Dr. Bill Amalu out of California. The device is elegant and simple. It might get you in trouble at the airport unless you do a lot of traveling and you get to know the TSA agents really well. Because yes, the handle is built off of the ergonomic design of a Galil assault rifle made in Israel. So this is an actual model from that hand because they found that the 8.5 degree was ergonomically where my finger pointed is where I was going. Okay. The first model that Roger had was this. It would look like this, and so you either had to scan like this or try to stand behind them somehow and go like this. And Dr. Amalu says, have you watched Star Trek yet? Roger goes, well, yeah. He goes, you know those handles on the phaser? Just put one on the bottom of there. That way we go like this. So Roger went to his arsenal and found the Galil and took it apart and made a cast and put it on the bottom, and now we have the Titron scanner. Okay. The components in here, again, the thermocouples at the end of the barrel behind a sealed lens. They're actually epoxied and are part of this head. So this head is the heart and soul of the scanner. This can't be fixed. This can only be replaced. Electronics, that's easy. But the heart and soul of this is part of this big thermal sink here, this thermally stable machined aluminum head. That's what makes the Titronics the Titronics. Okay? The barrels have hypoallergenic and microbe resistant tips. They're easy to clean if you do it right. We just had somebody, didn't train their staff, said, hey, I need these cleaned once a week. So she set them like this and poured alcohol in them and took the the cotton swab, stuck them down as far as she could and went like this and left them to dry. And she came back and 2 of them didn't work. So it took a week and a half for us to clean all that crap out and get it back. So he was out 2 of his scanners for 2 weeks.
Is the handle made out of aluminum as
Yes,
well?
yes, the handles are made out of aluminum. The more thermally stable you can make the entire unit, the better, yes. But you'll notice there is a plastic, fairly thick plastic gasket here, because as soon as I grab this, that heat starts to change. But if it's set up right, grab this, scan, the heat hasn't had time to change the heat up here. If this was less thermally stable, it would more quickly transfer to the head. So I've asked that question too, is like, we could save a crap ton of money, make these $1,000 less if we could make this out of just plastic. He's like, it wouldn't work. Wouldn't work. Because by the time you grab this, the heat would start changing up here, and your scans will be off. So we're sticking with this because it works, and there's physics behind it.
Do you ever have problems with like connection with Bluetooth and stuff like that? You know, like how sometimes your
I have never had a problem with it. This is actually the one I use in my office. Never had a problem with it myself. Other offices, we've had reports. I've taken in my office and not had problems. It might be something, they might have metal in their walls, they're trying to scan in room A when the receiver's in room B. Bluetooth does that, but I've not had one. The older models tended to have more issues, the newer models, no issues whatsoever.
And as far as like in subluxation class at Palmer, we learned we're supposed to get as close to the skin. Now, how much will it throw off the skin if you were to put those probes on the skin itself?
It won't,
Okay.
unless you have to rescan a bunch of times.
Okay.
And then you'll have a little bit of irritation. But Roger said they were just dorking around one time and they took a loofah, actually they took a steel bowl to his back one side and made it red and did a scan. It was exactly the same as it was before.
Really? Okay. Wow.
So again, that capillary bed is not there for irritation, it's there for heat release. Okay, and it's thermal stability on the spine for around the spinal cord.
2 different types of heat also, correct?
Exactly.
Thermocouples are measuring convective, conductive,
Right.
measuring thermal.
Yep.
So I have 2 questions.
Sure.
So, I guess I'll start off. So my first one is, what would be the difference between Titron and like CLA?
Oh, first of all, this is what we focus on. We are the first and the best in the gold standard. CLA has less of the thermal heat sink. They have the barrels that move so that they're not the cold part of the thermocouple is not connected to the heat sink. Plus, they tend to give you derived data rather than raw data. I think they might be starting to give you that. And their focus is on giving you an array of data from this, surface EMG, range of motion, HRV, whatever the suite is. That's great information. But when it comes down to thermography, I think based upon the physics, I think they haven't picked up the ball there to give you the data you need for a pre and post scan. Now, what they do for rechecks and what they do for screenings, that's phenomenal. What they do for data they use for pre and post, I don't think they give enough data for you to use clinically.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
I have seen some prototypes of what they're trying to do. The way they do go about scanning is you have to tell it, okay, I'm starting this is L1, this is C1, this is T1. And so instead of reading things, it takes a bunch of data and then it maps it out for what you tell it. And so the way of graphing the data puts a lot of user error into the matrix, where we anchor all of our data to the last, when you let go of the trigger, that's where all the data is anchored from, regardless of how long it is. So if you start at sacrum, go up to C1 and let go, you start at T2, go to C1 and let go, you start at C3, they're all going to be representative and they're all going to be able to be turned data across. If you do it the other way, you're off a half inch, it's going to stretch or compress because they're always going to fill their graph to be exactly the same length across. And so if you're short, it's going to stretch that long and that messes up your pattern.
They also don't give you the length.
Right.
They also don't give you the length of the scan.
Because those rollers, they measure how far you've gone.
At every 16th of an inch, it triggers a picture.
And then my second question was, out of all the models, which one would you say is the most reliable?
Yes.
So there's no variability amongst each
No,
model?
because everything is the same. If you look at the three models here, this is a C5000, USB connected and powered. This is a C7, it's wireless Bluetooth connection. Everything is the same. This just has a Bluetooth component on it to take the signal and send it, and a battery, and then the power control unit on for the battery. That we even weighted them to feel the same.
Now, do you think that the
Now,
battery?
just letting you know, when I hand this to you, it's $12,000.
Trust that.
5 and 7, okay? If you drop it, we'll
Trust
talk.
me.
Okay, so they feel the same. Now this is a pediatric unit. Again, all the same, it's just built a little different to deal with smaller spines. Okay?
So those ones,
Thank you.
I thought those were both Bluetooth, that's why I asked. Both
No,
ones- You said
no.
one's USB.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, if you want to go, if I'm seeing 500 people a day, the Bluetooth, I'm going to have to charge it breaks, just because it's battery operated.
Right.
So if you want something that's going to go every time you pull the trigger, you're going to want a C5.
Okay.
But, remember I talked about dropping? So here's the computer.
Oh yeah, I just had a practical, got talking points for that.
Here's the scanner. Hey, they just got cords, and I just, $7,000, $5,000 sitting on there.
I don't know.
That
Can we
way.
pass these around? Or?
That way, yeah.
Please do.
Yep. I need to pay for my trip home, so somebody.
I'm much more
So-
prone to buy one than to drop.
You have to analyze your office setup,
That's nice.
and you have to see which ones. But the corded one's gonna give you, every time you pull the trigger, as long as the computer's on, it's gonna work.
It even feels like, especially because when I've shadowed back at home, the doc uses CLA, this feels like,
Yeah, again, I don't want to disparage my competition, because CLA does some amazing work.
I'm just saying, like, it just
Yeah.
feels,
Okay, so, does that answer your question on the scanners?
yeah, that was perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
So the other thing that we talked, sorry,
What was the battery charge on Bluetooth?
you have to charge them?
Yeah, but like how long does it usually last?
Usually 4 hours.
Okay.
It depends how many scans you're doing.
I get you. Yeah, yeah.
So it'll last.
Yeah, it'll last. Yeah, it's got a 3-year warranty on the battery, so. Yeah. The other thing is, you guys remember range of motion? We talked about range of motion? We have a hands-free range of motion, guys. Virtually hands-free. So, one of the problems with doing goniometry, have you guys experienced that in clinic yet? Can I use you?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so, no, have a seat,
Oh.
just right here. It's like, okay, so I've got the Porsche payment due Friday. It's like, okay, lean forward. Oh, no, man, that's horrible. Lean back. Lean your head. Oh, man, you're just not moving very well today.
Oh, I get.
There's too much user input into the range of motions, right? Okay, even if I stand over here, lean your head forward. Oh, is that, I don't know what that is. Oh, that looks good about right there. With your plastic thingy?
Yeah.
Okay, take your glasses off. Put that on. All right, so we're neutral, looking straight ahead. Good, touch your chin to your chest. You good there? All the way up, look straight ahead. Then your head, no, look straight ahead.
Oh, straight ahead.
Yeah, lean all the way back.
Now all the way back.
Lean all the way back. All right, look straight ahead. Nice and relaxed. Turn your face to the left. Is that good? Look straight ahead. Turn your face to the right. Oh, is that good? Look straight ahead. Now lean to the left, ear to your shoulder. Center. Then look straight up and lean to the right all the way here to the shoulder. Look straight up. So we just did a range of motion without any user examiner input whatsoever. And it comes up with some really cool graphs and stuff like that. So we have this available.
Are we able to see what you just did by
No,
any
because
chance?
that wasn't it.
I didn't know that was Bluetooth connected either. I
It
don't know.
is.
Oh, really?
It is. This.
You pressed the button, you had a placebo effect in when I
I
had
know,
it.
man. See? We also have another unit, so we can use this across any joint in the body. They're all programmed in there. It'll show up to 5 examinations, range of motion examinations, on its report compared to normal. So if you look at a circle, the outer rim is normal range of motion for cervical spine flexion extension. The middle one will show you the original scan, next scan, third scan, fourth scan, fifth scan compared to original. And so you could hand that to anybody, even a lawyer, and a lawyer could understand it. It's in color, and a box of crayons and a report saying, we're making improvement, please pay. Right? That was a joke about the crayons and stuff, but you know, anybody can understand that graph, and so that's what kind of what we've done. That's available too. And then this right here, people think is a toy, and people treat it as a toy. This is an adjustment simulator. Basically, it measures your thrust and the time it takes you to do the thrust, and puts it on a graph. So this can measure toggle, can measure knee chest. What most people don't know is the history of this. This was after a device that B.J. Palmer used in the clinics. He had a device that would measure amplitude and speed as well as torque. It was really cool. There's actually one in the museum at Sherman. It's just a pencil on a piece of paper, and it showed torque and stuff. It's really cool. But he would look at all his assessment stuff, his thermography, his x-rays, everything. He would thrust, 2, 3, 4, go to the patient, boom, come back, boom. If he felt good about those, he knew that what he did to the client was exactly what he practiced, is what he had in his head. So it's not just a toy, it is an assessment tool for you, the doctor, for you as a club, I know Sherman uses these as part of their clinical readiness and proficiency exam. You have to give me 10 exactly the same to pass. That's pretty impressive, rather than your favorite teacher passing you, but the guy next to you who she doesn't like has to do it over again. Okay, it takes the objectivity and puts it completely on technology. That's all we offer. We have 4 SKUs. 5. We have Bluetooth, C5, pediatric, range of motion, and adjustment simulator. Okay. What else do you want me to talk about? Are we done?
What do the adjustment simulator and the glasses cost?
The adjustment simulator actually has the drop stuff on it too. It's $2,500. So it's this, the program, the speeder board kind of thing. That's $2,500. The range of motion is $2,500. And then the C7 is $7,000, C5 is $5,000, the C5 pediatric is $5,000. Except for you guys. Specific centers get 20% off anything. You guys get 15% off one thing until you become part of the specific centers. Okay?
So if they want to come and get a scanner, Dwayne, they're just going to shoot you a message on Facebook.
You have to send me an email or on Facebook. Here's my card up here. You can get in touch with me first because the office doesn't know who you are. You have to tell me you were here. I'll verify with Grant, and then we'll get you set up. Okay?
Anybody got any last questions for Dwayne? Anything related to Mark?
Yes, sir.
Are we going over a little bit of pattern analysis?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are they pretty durable? So what happens if you drop them?
Yeah,
Will
that's
the barrel,
a good question.
where's the barrel breaks?
The barrel's not going to break. You can drive. One of the things Roger does is he collects old Army things and stores them for the apocalypse. And so you can drive over these with a deuce and a half, and they won't break.
Wow.
If you drop them, these screws here are actually high density plastic, and they'll shear off and absorb the impact from the drop. It's a pain to replace them, but it takes about 5 minutes, and we send you a kit to do that. And once you do it, you realize why you don't want to do it again.
Are the barrels one piece into the head there, or are they separate?
It is an aluminum barrel that's machined, and we have a press fit polycarbonate tip. That's press fit. You're not going to be able to pull that out without breaking it. And they're in there, and they have or the non-slip stuff with 2 set screws at the base. So these are in there. They're all the way in. They're all the way tight. Okay. These are plastic on aluminum base. I mean, you could probably break these if you hit them really hard, but they're set screws. They're easy to replace. This shearing off, if it's done just right, could break components inside, so you never want to do that. Okay? It's $5,000. Well, I'll tell you a story. That guy that had the go wrong, I told you about that, he borrowed this for the week. I got it back. They had dropped it. So you see the silver down here? These are metal screws. These won't shear. These will break parts inside, so I need to go and find my plastic ones and put them in there.
So what would you say would be like the perfect ideal situation to put your Titron?
Ideally, what I like to do is I like to involve my clients in what I'm doing. And so what I would do is I would have a scanning station where the screen's there, the seat's there, and my computer and stuff's kind of like at a 90-degree angle. So I can grab it, do my scan, see it, put it right back without any kind of travel. They get up and then they leave. There's no them walking past it. Okay? This takes a lot of that out of it because I can have this anywhere and goes with me, and I can still do the same thing without them worrying about them tripping on the cord. Right now, I have them sit on the adjusting table looking at the screen. I get behind them, scan up, blah, blah, blah. They just lay down. That's just my setup.
Did you get your scanners back from Tony?
Yes, that's these
Okay.
here. Yes, thank you.
Anybody got any last second questions for Dwayne? Dwayne drove 10 hours to come give you guys a presentation. He speaks for where Dwayne's heart is for the profession.
Well, then, as I was trying to tell you guys, you are the future of our profession because you're being taught when not to adjust. I can teach a blind rhino when or how to adjust. You know, find the high spot, push it down. That's a manipulation. I can teach a blind rhino to do that. You guys are being taught here how to be doctors. That's when you don't adjust. Okay, that's when you are so certain of what you know and what you see is not a civilization. I don't have anything to do with you today. See you next week. And so that's why we invested in you guys to get this information. Because me personally, Roger, the entire Titronics team, we want to save our profession and turn the boat back to being doctors of chiropractic, not chiropractic physicians or doctors of physical therapy that can manipulate. Okay? Did you hear our message? We're investing in you because you're the future of the profession. Obviously the future of what we do as well. We've had interest from osteopathic schools. There's one in Spartanburg. I'm good friends with the dean. I'm good friends with the vice presidents. They want this technology. I'm like, sorry, it's just for chiropractors. Other people are interested in this. We want to invest in you guys. That's why we're here. Okay? So make it worth it.
If you need anything from Dwayne, he is very responsive on Facebook. Their whole team, if you call up at Titronics and you have a maintenance issue or support issue or something like that, they're always good.
Not that we ever have that kind of issue.
No, we don't, but hey, stuff happens. And it's Jen, right?
Jenny takes care of the technical issues.
Yeah, Jenny's awesome. Jenny has straight up like kept her phone on her on a Saturday before and answered my phone call because I needed her.
Well,
We were out at El Salvador.
Yeah.
And we were at El Salvador and we were like, our computer doesn't have the drivers. So we had her remote in and install the drivers. Which was super
Just to
awesome.
let you know, we have 6,000 plus units in the field, and we only have her as our technical support. That's how often she gets called.
Yeah, very seldom.
And I've seen her in Las Vegas at an event, answer her phone and help a doctor that needed help
Yep.
when she was in Vegas.
Wow.
And if you're ever at an event and you run into Roger Titone, introduce yourself.
And prepared to sit and talk.
He will be wearing suspenders. No doubt about it. He's the man, second to Dwayne. But honestly, a freaking giant in our profession. I mean, without the Titronics software, without Roger going with DOSEP to innovate this, you don't see an objectifiable location of interference being present or not.
And what are the 9 chiropractors that's contributed to our profession in this way? You have Doss Evans, who was an electrical engineer, but he became a chiropractor. You have Roger. You have guys like Keith Wassalt and Roberto Monaco, Bill Estep, Jim Chester, Tristan Shaw. I mean, there's so few,
Right.
and Roger's one of those.
Right. So if you ever see him out there, pay your respects. I hope he's around forever. Because man, like the guys, I mean, so this, I mean, the guy was doing something with Klay Thompson. I mean, Pick his brain, talk to him.
Yeah.
It's a giant. Round of applause for Dwayne.